Now, Sports Talk with Broads. Here's Hunter Brody.
What is going on, everyone? I want to talk about Miles Sanders. I want to talk about the running back position in the NFL. Because I love Miles Sanders. I think he's going to be a tremendous player. Dating back to last season when he battled adversity early, he would always bounce everything to the outside, and then he found his groove. He realized what he needed to do to be successful. He hit the proper gaps. He read the tackles. He read the guards. He really developed into something awesome. Looking at his stats, it was an Eagles rookie record, 818 rushing yards. He had 50 receptions for over 500 yards. Which was an awesome addition to that Eagles offense, a back who can catch the football out of the backfield and make special plays. He was number 8 in all-purpose yards with over 1,600, so yeah, it was really awesome to watch. And then you saw a report that he really wants to be a versatile player like Christian McCaffrey. That would be lethal. He would be an absolute stud if he can turn into a Christian McCaffrey. Here's where I have some sort of, I'm not going to say problem, but I just have question marks around this scenario. McCaffrey just signed a 4-year extension, $16 million per, which is a lot of money for a running back. You can argue he does way more than just a normal running back, and that is very fair to say. But when building a roster, knowing you have a quarterback like Carson Wentz that is going to be making a significant jump when it comes to how much he's making per season, and you look at what other pieces they have, and what other holes they need to fill, and looking at Fletcher Cox, and looking at Brandon Graham, and looking at other players, and I know by the time Miles Sanders' contract is up, there will be some other contracts off the books, but you also have players you're drafting now that in the next couple seasons will need re-ups on their contracts too. There's a lot in play when you look at this window that I'm speaking about. But eventually Miles Sanders will need a new contract. And just looking at the running back position, you don't need to be spending $16 million per year on a running back. Let's look at the Los Angeles Rams. Let's look at what they did with Todd Gurley. A $60 million contract, $45 million guaranteed, and he looked like an absolute dominant force. And all of a sudden, with the snap of a fingers, boom, he's done. He's done. And that's the nature of the beast with this position. Now, this is why I'm torn. I don't know how to approach this situation. Because if you tell me Zeke is available and you got to sign him to that big-time deal, 6 years, $90 million, I'm all on it. You can't allow Zeke to leave your organization. If you are the Dallas Cowboys, you can't allow him to go just because it's a position that you don't value that much. Same with the Giants and Saquon Barkley. They drafted them specifically Saquon Barkley. They drafted him 2nd overall. They could have got a quarterback. Instead, they went with the running back. You don't just let him walk out the door. You're eventually going to have to pay him big-time money. There's a lot of guys out there that are very similar to that. Also, though, how about C.J. Anderson? This was a guy who got picked up and was running over Todd Gurley. How about Jordan Howard for the Eagles last season? How about Boston Scott? How about Phillip Lindsay? Let's talk about Chris Carson in the 7th round for Seattle. The value that you can find undrafted, the value that you can find late in the NFL draft. There are so many players that you can plug and play. And that's not to knock Zeke, not to knock Barkley or Miles Sanders or Alvin Kamara, any of these players. They have a special talent that totally help football teams. But when you are trying to build a roster and you have a quarterback that's making so much money and the new contract is in play and you have a Fletcher Cox and you just have all these other players, it's hard to think about paying a running back $16 million per year. But at the same time, do you let them just walk out the door? You drafted this kid in the 2nd round. You spent a high draft pick on him. He's developed. He's groomed. He's growing. And that's only been in the second half of 1 year. Just imagine what he will be. But this is the thing also. We are talking about a position where when you have more miles on you, that doesn't mean you are getting better. It's the complete opposite. It's almost like not rewarding Malcolm Jenkins for playing all those snaps. That's great you played all those snaps, Malcolm Jenkins, but that actually hurt your value because you played more, because your body took more damage. And with the running back position, the average years, it's not a lot. So eventually they will just hit a break and hit a stop, and they will completely go downwards in a different way, and the trajectory will be the complete opposite of what it once was. Is that worth it? I get it. You can't allow Christian McCaffrey to just walk out the door. He's a key piece to that offense. He's a key piece to what Matt Rule is going to put together with Teddy Bridgewater and Robbie Anderson. You got to have a guy like that. At the same time, do you? Can you find 3 running backs in different areas? How about this? For example, this isn't a guy that makes a huge splash when it comes to his name. But Devontae Freeman is a player that you can plug in a running back rotation. And he'll be fine. He'll be fine. Do you need to spend that much money taking away that $16 million per? What if you find 2 running backs that you can pay that $16 million to? So you have a 1 and a 2 worth $16 million combined, and then you have a third guy in the rotation that might be an undrafted player. That might be a guy that you got in the 6th round. Is that better? Is that more important? Instead of a $16 million running back, and then you got to find 2 players to fill that void elsewhere. You can use my point against me that there's value in so many places that you can find a way to get 2 nice players that will be effective for a low price tag and still pay your running back $16 million per year. You're right. You are absolutely right, because there are running backs that you can just plug and play all over the league. That is a very good point. I don't see the Eagles just cutting him later on when it's time for a contract extension. Let's clarify, that's not what I'm saying, but just processing, looking ahead, seeing how this league works, looking at the position, seeing how all over the league there are plenty of players that nobody ever hears about or even heard of before the draft or before the season. Here they are. It's just a sick running back who came out of nowhere that torched players and torched defenses and has so many touchdowns because it's a position that you can find so many players to do that at without having to pay a monster amount of money to. There are a few guys, though, that are different. I think Zeke is different. I think Barkley's different. I don't know if Miles Sanders will get to that level, and I hope that he does one day. He does have that competitive spirit. Him and Barkley both went to Penn State. They both work out together. He had to sit behind Barkley and really earn his way at Penn State. There is something to be said about his mindset, the way he approaches the game, the way he approaches getting better every single offseason. I feel like when it comes to film, he is so dialed in. He enjoys learning the game, and I think that is shown on the field. I'm basing this off of what I saw on the field. You saw a ton of rookie mistakes. Week by week, you saw something you really liked. You saw something different here. You saw the way he was able to block for his quarterback. He picked up a blitz or he ran a nice route down the sideline. He will continue to learn every single week, and that's why I look at maybe his development, and I look at the way he approaches the game. It's smooth. It's very professional-like, and that's awesome. Truthfully, that's awesome. Let's be clear once again. I'm not saying I don't want Miles Sanders here. I'm not saying I don't think that he will help this team. I personally believe if he continues to work and he continues to have this great mindset, the Eagles will pay him and he will be a part of this franchise if he continues to take the proper steps in his career. I just question to an extent, is the running back worth it? It's not, is Miles Sanders worth it? It's not if Todd Gurley in his prime was worth it, if Kamara or Zeke or Barkley. It's not about if these players are worth it, because everyone can agree that they have outstanding talent. It's how much money can you put into a running back in this era of football? That's the question. How much money can you put towards one specific running back in a league where you need 3? let's be real. You need 3 guys. It doesn't work the same way where you give one guy the football 7 million times and you run downhill. You have different styles. Offenses are so different these days. You have a guy who can run in between the tackles. You have a power running back. You got a guy that can catch the ball out of the backfield. You utilize different packages, and you have so many different looks for the other team's defenses. You need 3 backs. And let's talk about injuries. It happens all the time. You can't talk about football without talking about injuries. Well, what happens if that guy goes down and now you need to work with other players and other pieces? That one big time guy goes down, you are possibly screwed. Rather than if you have a couple guys, instead of one great player, you work that money around having maybe 3 really solid running backs that you can bang, 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 and just work in a rotation. And if something does happen, if something was to go down, you might be in a better position if you have just, say, 3 good running backs compared to 1 elite running back and then 2 guys that are okay, but nothing serious. Now, I brought up a couple times that players can just walk out the door. You're not going to allow them to just walk out the door. And when I say that, I mean leave the organization. That doesn't necessarily mean leave without getting anything back. So if you look at the way an organization can process this and handle this, they can use that to their advantage. If teams know that Miles Sanders can be a really good player in this league that can catch the football out of the backfield, that can pick up blitzes, who can clearly run the ball very well, and he's coming off of that rookie contract, maybe the Eagles can do this. And once again, I don't see them doing this. I'm just raising some questions in terms of the running back position and paying them so much money, because all of a sudden they can just fall apart and totally get destroyed. And a lot of positions can be that way, but with the running back, it specifically happens way more than any other position. So what if the Eagles, at the end of his rookie contract, maybe they dangle him around a little bit, maybe after some franchise tags are in play, but they eventually dangle him around a bit and see if other teams bite. Maybe they are willing to give up some draft picks. Maybe they are willing to give up some pieces. And then you start the rotation all over again of getting a young running back, run him to the ground, run him to the ground, run him to the ground. Okay, it's time to give up. All right, let's find a way to dangle that player out to another team, and maybe you get a draft pick again. And it's a big circle. I think that there is a way to master this when it comes to this position. Find ways to get a young guy, let him run, let him do his thing, let him run, and then, hey, it's not going to happen here. We are not going to pay you a big-time payday, so we will find a way to get some assets back in return. We will put you in a spot where you will get paid a decent amount of money from another team eventually, and then the Eagles start the rotation back over again. Think about their stud running backs as a franchise over the last how many years? It really hasn't been that guy. We all remember Brian Westbrook, of course. He's the one that really pops. He's the one where it's damn okay. And if you start going back in different eras of football, there was a time where the running back position was way more serious. It was a league where you had that one running back where you handed the football off and he would take it all the time because it wasn't a passing league like it is now. So we're not going to go back to those eras. I'm just looking at the Eagles organization and how they handle the running back spot. This is how it is. This is how they do things, and I don't necessarily think it is the wrong way to do it. We mentioned some of these top running backs, right? And it is very similar to what I've mentioned before about the DeAndre Hopkins, about these top paid wide receivers in this league, these true number ones. Does that always relate to winning a Super Bowl? And I don't think it does. It doesn't mean these players don't help their teams. And it doesn't mean that I don't want some of these players. I don't think number ones always relate to winning Super Bowls when it comes to a wide receiver position. Yet, if the Vikings report is true, if that Cleveland Browns report is true, which they came out, the Browns did, and stated that that is a false report, but whatever. Let's throw the hypothetical out there that a second and a fifth in next year's draft would get OBJ. As much as I don't think number ones mean winning Super Bowls, I would still go out and do that based off of the value. Well, I still think to an extent it's important and nice to have a true number one running back and a lethal weapon, but that doesn't necessarily always relate to winning a Super Bowl. The Eagles won a Super Bowl with the right guys. Jay Ajayi, LeGarrette Blount, and hold on, wait for it, an undrafted player in Corey Clement, who had one hell of an insane Super Bowl, and he had a fantastic season as a whole. I rest my case. And look around the league. It's a thing. Teams don't have that special individual talent at the running back position that's getting paid monster money every single year they're in the Super Bowl. You build in the trenches. You have your quarterback. You have some nice cornerback play. You can make it work with some good players, some really good players. It doesn't have to be that monster paid guy. And another thing that helps, which relates to what's coming up this week, is drafting well. Because if you draft well, you have a lot of guys that are not getting paid a lot of money, which then opens the door for that contract for the quarterback. Carson Wentz, big payday. It also plays in, okay, if you do want to pay Miles Sanders, this at least gives you that opportunity to do it because you have a lot of rookie players playing on pretty much nothing at all in relation to what some of the big cats are getting paid in the league. So it is huge to start hitting on draft picks. That will open up the door for you to work around this situation where you need to pay a running back a lot of money. I'm just scared with the position. Knowing that you can find players in other ways and to find value in other spots, and the Eagles seem to do that. It's an organization we were talking about that seem to do it. They have a track record of being able to execute that plan and finding good value. Jay Ajayi for a fourth-round pick, that's insane value. LeGarrette Blount, really nice value. Corey Clement, come on now. Do we even need to talk about it? He was undrafted. Now, what does that mean for right now? Yeah, he clearly isn't it at this moment. He's been banged up with injuries. He hasn't been the 2017 Corey Clement. You can continuously plug and play players in every single year. It is a spot where you can find new running backs every year and put them in a new system. They get the ball and they hit the proper gaps. If you have the right rotation of guys, you don't need the same running back for 10 years, 9 years, 8 years. They don't last that long. They get beat up. They get run into the ground. Todd Gurley was so insane and so lethal. He was so good during his prime. When he signed that contract, you're like, wow, the Rams are going to be special for years to come. He's going to be running that ball for years to come. It's going to be tough to stop Sean McVay, Jared Goff, Todd Gurley. It's going to be really hard to stop a team like that. And all of a sudden, he collapsed. And guess what? That happens to a lot of players. A lot of players. My big fear is Miles Sanders looks great for the next how many years, and maybe a franchise tag is in the mix, or Howie Roseman skips over the franchise tag so he doesn't have to pay him as much, and he works his money, and he does a fantastic job with the cap, as he always does. And then as soon as he gets that payday, he gets one good year in him, and then boom, that's it. He's banged up. His knees are screwed. He's never the same. He gets hurt. And it just goes like that with this spot more than any other spot. It happens to Carson. Carson gets hurt, and you paid him a lot of money, and he can get hurt, and it can be the same thing. And you can say it about any position in football. I'm not using the excuse or even accepting the counter argument of, well, if that's the case, then you shouldn't pay everybody. There is a reason why I am saying this about this specific position on the field. Chris Carson, Boston Scott, Phillip Lindsay, right? These are good players, Now, these aren't, you don't win with 3 Boston Scotts. That is not the argument I am trying to make. You don't win with 3 Boston Scotts. but you can find value in free agency. There's plenty of teams that are giving up a guy here and there because guess what? He's got a lot of work in him. He took a lot of snaps. He took a lot of beatings. So you can find those value guys. You can find the Jordan Howards. You can find those players every single year, every single offseason. You can get an undrafted guy, one guy who might be your third back. Then you go out and you get a nice player like Jordan Howard. And maybe you get a Devontae Freeman. I'm telling you, if you had a Jordan Howard, a Devontae Freeman, and a Boston Scott in your rotation, and you have a really great quarterback, and you got some nice wide receivers, and you got a good defensive front, and you got Darius Slay, and you got a nice offensive line, you're going to be fine. I promise you're going to be fine. I'm not knocking Miles Sanders and what he can be. I'm not knocking Zeke or Barkley or McCaffrey or Alvin Kamara. I'm not knocking these players. I'm looking at how much money can I invest in that spot and how long can I tie them up for. Because at the time where Miles Sanders is going to make that extra jump in money and when his contract will be boosted, he's not this young kid anymore who is very raw in the NFL. He's going to have a ton of snaps on his body. He's going to be getting a lot of work. And you don't give someone more money in the NFL based off of what they've already done. That's what you take off of their contract. Oh, you've played 10 years? Well, I'm not paying you like you've played 10 years. You do not get extra money. It's not like you work in an office building. Well, you've been here for 10 years. We are going to give you a raise, or you are going to now do this, and you will take a bigger step in your career. It's the complete opposite in pro sports, especially in this tough, brutal battle in football. It's crazy. It doesn't seem right. It's just what it is, though. It's what it is. You have to accept it. I mentioned the draft, and it's sneaking up. It really is sneaking up. I can't believe it is almost here. It's this week, and the WNBA had their draft, and I was curious to see how it would be like from a visual standpoint, and it was way better than the horse competition. I think we can be very clear about that. It was very good in terms of seeing the people and hearing them talk, and all right, I'm sure the NFL will have a lot of films, a lot of cameras going out and filming this the proper way. Roger Goodell is going to be all ready to rock and roll. I think the NFL is going to put on a fine product. I'm sure a lot of preparation is going down for this upcoming week, and I can't wait to see what the Eagles are going to do. I saw a mock draft with them picking a linebacker in the first round, and I do not see that happening at all. I saw some KJ Hamler reports, and they're very interested in the Penn State player. He has some ties with Miles Sanders, of course, and very close to Philadelphia. Penn State is to an extent. I mean, it's not right next door, but it is right next door at the same time. He has the skill set that this team can totally utilize, which would be awesome. How about this? Trey Burton on the market. Do the Eagles need a third tight end that they can pick up? Philly. Trey Burton wasn't the same as he was here in Chicago. It didn't work out as planned. He wasn't the healthiest, if I remember properly, so maybe that played into a factor. He was banged up. Maybe they snag him for that third guy because he knows the playbook. He's been here. He's comfortable with Doug Peterson. He had one of the most iconic plays in this city before, and I would be all right with that. If you think about what they've been rocking the last couple, it's been Richard Rodgers, and it can't get much worse than that. That dude found no ways to really have any impact on this team whatsoever. I guess it comes down to a Josh Perkins, if they want to go with that role again or not. But I'm okay with him as a third guy too. We'll just have to wait and see how it all plays out. But I wouldn't be opposed to bringing back someone like Trey Burton. A lot of fans see the name though and instantly say, yeah, of course, yes, just because of the emotional tie. It didn't work out that well in Chicago, and he's not this stud tight end. He did have a good year in 2017. If it worked out, it worked out. It would be a nice addition, but I'm not going to beat my fist and beat the hammer down for it. We'll see how it all shapes up. It's just an emotional thing because of what happened here with the Philly and the big-time moment. This is a new era of Eagles football ready to begin on draft night. It's a new look for the Eagles. It's a new look with an old look. It's a new combination, though. It's a new combination. Weaving out some veterans, getting in some young guys, bringing in Darius Slay. It has a different feel to it, a different vibe to it. It is now starting to develop into the Carson Wentz show. He's going to be that leader. Malcolm Jenkins is gone. Fletcher Cox, Brandon Graham, they will lead. Darius Slay will absolutely lead. But now it's Carson Wentz. And Carson Wentz has the big-time money surrounding his name now. The contract is in effect. It is Carson Wentz time. It is time for him to really step up and be the leader that this locker room truly needs. And I think that might have to do with Howie Roseman's decision on Malcolm Jenkins. Right or wrong, getting rid of the Malcolm Jenkins presence might open the door for Carson Wentz to come in and be that guy. They sit down in their office, Howie and Carson. Listen, Carson. It's your time. It's your time. It's your room. Not that it wasn't last year or the year before. He's the quarterback. It's always the quarterback's room. But Malcolm Jenkins, his professionalism and his veteran leadership was so high, maybe to an extent, and it's not a knock on Carson to say this, it's really just to praise what Malcolm brought to the table and how much respect people really had for him. It's not a knock to Carson. Just because Malcolm was that phenomenal at leading and having that type of presence, that doesn't mean Carson stinks or Carson wasn't useful in that leadership role. It does play a factor, though, that maybe sometimes it's too much of a presence with Malcolm. I think that had to do with what Howie Roseman did. Right or wrong. Let's move the torch. Let's make it Carson squad. And I'm not necessarily against it. So with that being said, I want to hear your thoughts. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you are listening on YouTube, please leave a comment, subscribe, and hit that thumbs up button. And if you are listening to this on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, any platform out there for podcasts, make sure you leave a review and a 5-star rating. I would greatly appreciate it. Thank you so much, and I will see you next time.